See more on the Supreme Court's decisions at afn.net. Last week, an Army captain pleaded guilty to killing his unborn child. He had been accused of secretly putting an abortion drug into the drink of the victim, a junior enlisted soldier who he was in a relationship with. The woman then miscarried in her 13th week of pregnancy. He ordered the drug through the mail. Sherry Biggs is a U.S. representative from South Carolina and made these comments on Washington Watch.
It's heartbreaking when you hear this story, and not to mention it seems inhumane. I can't understand how we would allow this to happen. First of all, I can't imagine harming an unborn baby, let alone my own. It's disgusting is what it is, and it's inhumane, and I think we have to stand up and we have to speak out on this.
She said the drug causes lasting impacts on females. Biggs is a family nurse practitioner as well as a psychiatric mental health practitioner.
We're talking about the physical impact, not to mention what happens mentally to an individual. And I don't even want to think about what that young lady that was given that drug unknowingly ingested it, right, and causing her to lose her unborn baby. I can't imagine what she's going through.
She is the original co-sponsor of the Ban Abortion by Mail Act. She said there must be safeguards put in place. Texas Scorecard says a federal district judge has denied the state's motion to dismiss a lawsuit filed by the East Plano Islamic Center against the Texas Funeral Service Commission over the right to perform funeral services. After receiving a cease and desist letter from the Texas Funeral Service Commission in March of 2025, which accused the group of operating a funeral home without proper state licenses, the center filed suit against the commission in July of 2025. The hot weather is spreading across the Midwest and will reach the East Coast by tomorrow, when it will feel like 100 to 110 degrees as the heat expands eastward. Fox Weather's Britta Merwin.
And most cities are looking at 2 to 3 days of triple-digit temperatures, the actual air temperature. So when was the last time some of these folks had 100 degrees? Because you might feel like, oh, it always hits 100 degrees in the summer. But to be quite honest, that's really hard to hit 100 degrees in many of these Northeast cities. Albany has not hit 100 degrees since 1953. Wow. Look at Worcester, Mass, 1911.
Some places could see the heat index as high as 115 degrees. Elsewhere today, the Storm Prediction Center says there is a 3 out of 5 risk of severe storms across the Central High Plains and a 2 out of 5 risk across the Plains, Great Lakes, and Northeast. And that is a wrap on news for this time around. You can see more news at afn.net, and we appreciate your listening. I'm Robert Thornton.
AFA Stream is a resource for life-changing instruction and information, a source of wholesome entertainment and relaxation, plus access to some of your favorite AFA shows. You can watch a lot of content for free, or you can become a Great Commission partner. Then you'll not only open the door to everything AFA Stream has to offer, you'll get benefits like a subscription to The Stand and some really nice exclusives. Why not get started today? It's easy. Visit stream.afa.net.
Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Nurse Mama Show, prescribing hope for healthy families here on American Family Radio. Here's your host, Professor, Pediatric Nurse Practitioner, and Mom of 4, Dr. Jessica Peck.
Well, hey there, friends, and welcome to my favorite time of day, getting to spend time with you, prescribing hope for healthy families. And we are talking about some really important things. Yesterday, we talked about where is God? How do you feel heard by God even when you are not healed? And today we're bringing you a similar sort of hope. Where is God in the middle of grief? We all know the world is broken and it is not as it should be. And so many of us see trials and tragedies and traumas happening all around us. It may be happening to someone you love. It may be happening to someone you just see on the news that breaks your heart. It may be happening in your own home and your own family. But we live in a culture that really wants to avoid any sort of pain. We would love for everything to be comfortable, everything to be perfect, for nobody to ever be sad. The good news is a world like that does exist, but it's not here on earth. And here on earth, we silence grief with busyness and we distract ourselves with scrolling. We self-medicate And we just kind of expect people to move on before their hearts are ready because maybe I'm kind of tired of talking about something that's sad. I want to move on even though you're not ready. And even well-meaning Christians can feel the pressure to just have that right spiritual response, the right Bible verse, the right perspective, the right timeline for healing. Just, it's almost like a pop quiz in the moment. But we know better as human beings. We know better as families. Every family eventually walks through some sort of loss, and it may be the death of a spouse or a parent or a child, a miscarriage, infertility, divorce, a prodigal children, a broken dream, a chronic illness like we talked about yesterday, or just watching life unfold so much differently than how we imagined it to be. Grief is part of living in this broken world. It is part of our normal human experience, but Scripture tells us not to ignore grief. Jesus wept. We know that David lamented. We know Job cried out. Why? And in the middle of his suffering. And Paul described God as the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort. So today we're talking about, what does biblical comfort really look like? Not just easy answers, not spiritual cliches, but the presence of Christ in suffering. And our guest understands this in a very deeply personal way, as is often the case. And I'm so encouraged every time I hear someone share hope in the midst of hurting. We welcome today Lisa Appelo, and she suddenly became a widow after the unexpected death of her husband at a young age, her husband Dan. She found herself raising 7 children while navigating that overwhelming journey of grief herself. And out of that journey has come a very powerful ministry of hope and really a beautiful new devotional journal called God of Comfort. And it reminds us that the way through grief isn't a formula. It's not a life hack. It's not a class. It is a person. And we're so glad to have her here. We first had her actually in May of 2024. We talked about her book, Life Can Be Good Again, Putting Your World Back Together After It Falls Apart. I would encourage you, if you know someone walking through a grief journey, just give them that and don't say a word about it. Just say, I just saw this and thought you could use it. But today we're talking about her new devotional journey, God of Comfort, a devotional journal for the grieving heart. It's beautiful. It's such a beautiful book. It would be beautiful for someone to use it, to give it to someone. Lisa, we're so glad to have you back here. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Jessica. So good to be back with you. And thank you for making space for this. You said it's a tough topic, and it is. So thank you for having me.
It is a tough topic, but I know of no one more hopeful than you, Lisa. You just always encourage me, even despite what you've walked through. And I'm so grateful for the ways that you use your gifts as a Bible teacher, a speaker, an author, a ministry leader, and you have walked this journey. And there may be some who definitely remember your story. I know it definitely stuck with me. But there are so many people who relate to what you went to. It's that before and after moment, the phone call, the diagnosis, the just unexpected turn in life. And for those who haven't heard your story, would you please take us back to that before and after moment that you walked through and tell us about your grief journey?
Yes. I was married to my high school sweetheart. We had met, if you can believe it or not, in 7th grade youth group. So we had a long history together. Of course, he was just another boy across the room. But by high school, we were dating. He was my first boyfriend and my only boyfriend. In college, we went to the same university together. We got married. And, as I described my life, I would never describe it as perfect. We for sure went through struggles. We had marriage issues we worked through. We had parenting struggles we worked through. Financial, just all the things that as a young and growing married couple, those things. And we had gone through real testing, I felt like. But honestly, we came to a summer, it was actually Father's Day weekend, and we were in a good place. Dan was in a job that he loved. He had been in a job that was very frustrating, and God had moved us to a new city. He was in a job that he loved. I, of course, loved watching him flourish. We had 7 children by that time, and the youngest was 4. The oldest was 19. He had just finished his first year of college, so I was kind of the hub of the wheel. I was just getting everybody where they needed to go and making sure the house was running and food was in the pantry and people were being fed and taken care of. And I liked being in that place. And I thought, this would be the rest of my life. On a very normal Thursday night, we had pizza as a family and kids went up to bed. I put the littles to bed and I had a big day the next day. So I said, my husband was working in his chair and doing some stuff for his mom. And I said, I'm going to go to bed. Good night. Like I just told him good night, like I had 1,000 other nights. And he said, I'll be in there in a few minutes. And so I fell asleep. And sometime in the early, dark morning hours of that Friday morning, I woke up to his funny breathing. And Jessica, I wasn't even awake enough to take in what was happening. Just heard that funny breathing, nudged him, said, go ahead, turn over. I said, turn over, honey. I thought it was just a nightmare. And we would wake up later to his alarm. But he didn't turn over. And that breathing continued. And I flipped on the overhead light and could see immediately that something was very wrong. And so we did all the things. I started CPR. We called 911. They were there within like minutes. They took him by ambulance. And when I arrived to the hospital, they took me in that room you never want to go in. And a very kind ER doctor said that they had worked on Dan for over 2 hours and they had never been able to revive him. And so that was it. Like you said, a before and an after with no signs, no symptoms, no warning. And that's so often we get that phone call or that diagnosis. There's no premonition that something's going to happen or no forward notice. And so I went home to tell my 7 children that their dad was in heaven and to try to walk through this with them.
Lisa, I've heard you share your story many times now, and even still now, I sit here just with chills, just with heartache in my heart. I just feel an aching in my spirit. And even when you said, okay, I did all the things, I did CPR. I mean, the everything that you listed after that, Lisa, is nothing that anybody should ever have to do. Nothing that anybody ever wants to do. You never think about doing. And there may be even people sitting here thinking, I don't want to think about that. That scares me. That just brings some fear into my heart because I don't even want to think about that because that happens. What would you say to people who just feel their immediate response to hearing your story would be fear? What would you say to them now that you have been on that before and after? What have you learned about God that helps to quell that fear of the unimaginable?
Well, that's a great question because I think when something like this happens, these are the kind of things that happen to other people. I was the one who was very happy to bring the casserole to somebody else. And now here it was in my life. And it takes our mind so long to wrap itself around the fact that this is now our life. And I was very fearful. I felt like at any moment the other shoe could drop. If this happened, what else would happen? And so I had to really grapple with that. If I realized early on in my journey that if I did not get a handle on this fear, I would be completely paralyzed from moving forward or being able to show up to parent my children. And so I would say to that person listening that when those thoughts come, first of all, the things we fear rarely happen. Secondly, we have to rely on the promises of God. We have to live this life that He's given us right now. And we have to take captive that fear because it will paralyze us. It will keep us from savoring the good and living in the good that is now. And so I learned to take captive those lies that fear drives, and to replace it with the truth of God. So the truth is that God will give us grace for whatever. It will be too much for us to handle. But God will absolutely be present in it. He will absolutely give us grace for it. He will absolutely give us purpose again. And even in those events in life that we never saw coming or never wanted, He will bring good again. That is not like the end of the story.
Lisa, it's one thing to have that for yourself, to go through that grieving, to do all of the physical things that are related to grieving, all of the emotional, the mental processes, but it's not lost on me that you had 7 young children ranging in age at that time from 4 to 19, that you not only had to take care of yourself, you still had to be that center of that hub, but you also had to, now you're everything. Now you're absolutely everything. And when your children are experiencing their world feeling shattered and life going on as you didn't imagine it would be, how do you balance that, taking care of yourself while also nurturing their faith journey? Because that just seems very overwhelming.
Yeah. I think the first thing is that we have to make sure as a parent that we are anchored, just like we said, in the truth of God. And for me, that looked like I did have some older kids in the home, so I would kind of get them going in the morning, and then I would get them in my minivan and drive around the corner to a park. And that is where I would cry out to God. I would ask the hard questions. I would journal through things. My kids had seen me cry, but that is where I kind of did the real deep work of grief. And then after doing that, I would open the Word. I was reading through the Bible. And so whether you have a devotional that you're reading or a Bible reading plan, open the Word and let God remind you of who He is and His promises for you, His character for you. And when we, like every day, I would kind of get re-anchored and renew my hope. It would be enough hope to go back home and show up for my kids that day. And it was not enough for the week. It was not like I could do that on Monday and then it would get me all the way through the week. I was in such an intense time for myself and for my children that I needed that every day. And so I think when we are walking kids through, the first thing is to anchor ourselves in the truth of God. And the second is to be a student of our children. My kids were all different ages. I had boys and girls. And so the teens were grieving differently than the little ones. And so to be a student of our child, of their personality, of what they're doing, and to try to meet them where they are, create a warm place in your home that they feel safe to open up about grief or their questions or whatever is going on. We can't fix their pain. And that is a hard realization as a parent, because that is our go-to. We just are like made to want to fix or take it away for them, and we can't fix it. All we can do is love them in it, point them to God, and walk with them in it.
Lisa, you have so much wisdom to offer. Everything that you have said is just filled with encouragement and wisdom. And I'm so glad that you brought up that need to create space and grace for everyone to grieve differently, because you're absolutely right. Even thinking about children, they grieve differently developmentally, depending on how their brain can think, even accepting the permanency of death. They're at a completely different place. Your littles are going to be at a much different place than those who are older and more capable of abstract thinking. And then you layer on God-given temperament and personality, and how some are going to cope by, just powering through, and some are going to cope by it's that kind of trauma response. Some are going to freeze, some are going to want to run, some are going to want to fight. And that is perfectly normal. Well, we're already coming up on our first break, Lisa, but when we come back, one of the things that I want to talk about is a timeline for grief. Now, I talked to you first, a couple of years ago, and you now have many years removed since Dan went to be home with the Lord. And I think that helps give you perspective, but grief is not a linear journey. And I think in today's society, we don't have a lot of patience for grief that lasts a long time. We just kind of want instant fix, instant gratification. That makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, can we just move on now? Let's talk about that loopy, back and forth, messy journey that is grief, that it ebbs and it flows, and what perspective God has given you in healing over time. The devotional is called A Devotional Journal for the Grieving Heart, God of Comfort, by Lisa Appelo. Someone in your life needs that word of encouragement. We'll have more for you after this break.
With today's Dr. Dobson Minute, here's Dr. James Dobson.
The sexual revolution has had a dramatic effect on the way the courtship game is played. Boys have traditionally been the initiators, and girls were quite content to be the responders. But what we're seeing now is a new sexual aggressiveness among females that has many parents worried. Some girls are so bold with their offers of sexual favors and with their hard-charging approach that males are often intimidated and anxious to escape all that firepower. I believe it's still appropriate for parents to teach their girls a certain reserve, a certain self-respect when it comes to romantic relationships, especially during the awkward experiences of early adolescence. It may be difficult for a girl to pull in her horns a bit, but she'll be more successful and less vulnerable by attracting the object of her affection rather than trying to run him down.
For more information, visit drdobsonminute.org.
Hi, I'm Jan Harper. If you're a pastor's wife, you know both the blessings and the unique challenges that come with the life you and your husband live daily. We call it living in the fishbowl.
Details have been announced for the 2026 Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat. Once again, this year's retreat will be at Pickwick Landing State Park in Counce, Tennessee. From October 20th through the 22nd, pastors and their wives will enjoy rest, renewal, and fellowship hosted by Pastor Bert Harper, Director of Marriage, Family, and Pastoral Ministries at AFA and co-host of Exploring the Word on AFR, and his wife, Jan. Our special speaker will be J.J. Jasper of AFR. Your registration fee covers lodging, meals, and materials. All you need to do is get there. The annual AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat, October 20th through 22nd. Learn more and register at repairingthefoundations.net.
We'd love to see you there.
When I was about 5 years old, my dad got me my first real suit. Hi, I'm Jim Scudder with today's Moment in Grace. Dad said, "Son, all the girls are going to be chasing you now." At 5, I didn't really understand that. So when my sister Julie asked me to play tag, I put the suit on and told her, "Okay, now you can chase me." Pride creeps into our spiritual lives the same way. God gives us a talent or a season of growth, and suddenly we feel like we're really something. But without God, we're absolutely nothing. The moment we lose our upward gaze, we stumble. Keep your eyes on Him. That's where your strength comes from. For more daily devotionals, visit ingraceradio.com.
I've never known a love like yours. So intimate, so powerful. And I've tasted, I've seen, and nothing comes close. I've never known a love like yours. Jesus, your name is power. It's breath and living water. And your spirit guides me to the heart of the Father. Let your praise ring louder every day and every hour. 'Cause your spirit guides me to the heart of the Father.
Welcome back, friends. That is Heart of the Father by Ryan Ellis, and we are talking today about the heart of the Father for people who are grieving. We're talking today to Lisa Appelo, an author, a Bible teacher, and she is the author of a new devotional called God of Comfort, a devotional journey for the grieving heart. We have had Lisa on before, and she's written another book called Life Can Be Good Again. She talks about losing her precious husband, Dan, unexpectedly when her 7 children were young. And we've been talking about some of the realities of grief, that including giving yourself permission to grieve, knowing that grieving hurts, loss hurts, even though we know that God is good. We know that life is hard too. We know that children grieve differently than adults, and developmentally it takes them a longer time. And when you build in their temperament, it can be hard when you see someone grieving not like you're grieving, and you think, oh, you don't care as much. And they do. God just made us all differently. I can tell you that presence matters so much more than your words. Just sitting there with someone, giving them love, giving them comfort, just being there matters so much more than giving them a word of wisdom. And God is not intimidated by our questions. And Lisa, before the break, we were talking about how really, I think society today, we are so acculturated to instant gratification. We want to feel comfortable. And so we have even gotten really good as a society to start self-medicating, where we know how to scroll, we know how to numb out, we know how to run away, we know how to do anything that we can to not feel that grief, not to walk through it. We don't want to do that. And when, I think when somebody's grieving now, you look at their social media presence and you think, oh, they're already moving on. Oh, they're already doing that. Or, oh, they're still grieving over that. And it's been how many years? I can't imagine what it would be like to live in a fishbowl like that and to try to manage everybody's expectations of a timeline for grief. But now that you have some perspective, what wisdom could you give us in looking at that timeline and helping supporting people through that timeline or even our own timeline of a grief journey?
I think you're absolutely right that our culture is grief naive, and it does unsettle us. And so our culture tries to box it in and put it in a box. I think it would tell the person who is either walking with somebody who's grieving or is walking through a loss themselves that grief will likely take longer than you think, and it will probably be harder than you imagine. And I know that doesn't sound like good news, but I tell you that because sometimes when somebody tells you that, it does allow you to say, well, okay, well, that's why I'm still feeling this way. Well, that's why this still hurts. That's why I still got triggered yesterday. And no two journeys are alike. It is going to be completely different. So you may have somebody in your life who had a similar loss and theirs looks different. They have taken some steps that you just can't imagine taking right now. And that's okay. That is okay. The beautiful thing is God never gives us a timeline. Never do we see in scripture him saying you should be over this by now, or this is what I expect of you. He has no expectations. He simply invites us to bring our hurt and our pain to him and to keep going to him and trusting that it won't always feel like that. So while I would say to somebody, it would probably take longer than our society says and be harder than our society makes it out to be, it won't always feel like this. And the good news is that when we do that when we work through loss, and it is excruciating, but as we do that, we may first feel like we're cycling back through, like, whoa, like I am cycling back through these same things that I thought I had already processed, and here I am again. That is the nature of grief. It is not just linear steps forward. And so as you work through grief, you will find likely that those cyclings become farther and farther apart, and they last less long, those pits of grief. And you will see signs that you have a new plan for the day, or that you were able to talk about your person with a smile on your face and a warm memory instead of like painful tears. So the good news is that it won't always feel like this. And tell yourself that when you have that day where this enemy is lying to you and saying like, this is all there is, and you will never have joy again. You coach yourself that it will not always feel like this, that God does have joy for you.
Lisa, I think somewhere in that timeline, people just don't know what the norm is. And people generally, in general, are very kind-hearted. They're very well-intentioned, and they don't want to say anything. So if it seems like, okay, your grief journey is getting better, like, oh, I don't want to bring up anything. I don't want to ask anything because I don't want to trigger a grief response. I don't want to make you sad. I don't want to make you think something like that. So sometimes they just don't say anything. Like, I'll bring it up if they bring it up. But I remember very specifically one friend that I had who had lost her husband, and I brought something up about her husband, and she, all of a sudden, she just broke into the biggest smile. I did not expect her to smile, but she just said, oh, it's so good to hear someone say his name. And you just gave me the gift of his presence. You just gave me the gift of someone else who remembers him. And I remember him, and I don't want him to be forgotten. And I know, Lisa, that everybody's response is going to be different, but what words of encouragement can you give to other people who are on the outside of this grief journey, and how they can create some space for uncomfortable emotions, just to give people freedom to grieve, to say, hey, I just want to give you freedom to have whatever emotion you're feeling in the moment. Like, that's okay. Don't feel like you need to apologize. If it comes up, we'll just take it as it comes. How can people be more comfortable in that uncomfortable space?
I think the first thing is don't expect to fix their pain. You don't have magic words. You don't have a magic thing that you're going to do that is going to, just like I couldn't fix my children's pain. We cannot fix one another's pain. That is a role for God. He is our healer. But you can walk with him in it. You can be with him. The best thing that somebody wants to hear is you're not alone. and their grief. And so your friend, when she mentioned, or you, when you mentioned your friend's spouse, that name, you entered into that place and didn't stay on the outside where it would have been more comfortable. So the first thing is, don't expect to fix her pain. And the second thing is, I do think we're going to have to be okay with awkward. It will feel awkward. Even honestly, as somebody who has walked through deep grief, when I go meet, as I did this weekend, a brand new widow, as I just shared with you, one of my children is walking through a very deep loss. And I find myself questioning, should I say this? Should I do this? Will this be too much? Do they know I care? And so just be okay with awkward. It's a tough place. I would say proactively what somebody can do is if you have a picture of that person, if you have a story of that person, if you know that person, yes, absolutely share it. You will not remind them of their loss. They're thinking about it 24/7. And those are just pockets of joy in their grief, even 5 years later, or on a milestone day, for you to say, I'm thinking about them, I'm thinking about you today, and praying for you today. For you to say, if you don't have any words to say, just to say, I am praying for you. Is there some specific way I can pray for you? Don't say, how are you doing? That's too big. Nobody can answer that. Not even, how are you doing today? They're overwhelmed in every way. But to say, I am praying for you. Is there something specific I can pray? That just opens the door and lets them share as much as they want to share. And then you be faithful to that. Take that, say, I'm going to steward this for you. And you know that whatever it is that they've given you, whether it's one of their children, or to sleep well, or maybe it's a task that they need to take care of, that you will cover that in prayer. I think those are some of the ways that we can come alongside those who are suffering or who are walking through a loss.
You know, you talked, Lisa, in your own personal grief journey about going to the Lord, about finding comfort in the presence of the Lord. You've just reminded us to take our friends, our family members, our loved ones who are hurting, take their burdens to the Lord. And yet there's a tension there, because when you go into the presence of the Lord, you know that the Lord could have intervened. You know, I'm sure that you had those thoughts, Lisa. I know that you have, because you've written about it. Like, why didn't God act another way? Why didn't he save this person? Why didn't he prevent this from happening? How do you see, but you've also told us that God is not afraid of our questions. How do you sit in the presence of God and give him those tough questions like that, thinking, why did this happen? And sitting with the one that you feel like could have changed that, yet trusting him with the outcome. How in the world do you get to that place?
Jessica, it was probably only a few months after Dan passed away where I read a viral news story. I think it was in my own state, about a very similar situation. This wife had woken to her husband's funny breathing. They tried CPR. They took him by ambulance to the hospital. Well, they pronounced him dead. And then they had disconnected all of the machines. The morgue, they were preparing him to go to the morgue. And his son walked in. He had a young adult son who walked into the room. His father had been pronounced dead. And he said, "You're not going to die today, Dad." And something happened, and that father began breathing again. And all the doctors, you can read about it, they're actually believers. They still testify to it today. The doctors were like, we have no explanation. This is a miracle. And I remember reading that and my heart sank, because I was like, I prayed too. I believed too. And I would have testified for you, God. We would have gone around and shared your miracle, and we didn't get it. And I know there's somebody listening who prayed. You had people praying for you. You even saw signs that God might be moving on your behalf, and yet you did not get the outcome that you wanted. And I think it is a place of tension, that place between the life that we wanted and the life that we have is surrender. That's what fills that gap. And we have to know, yes, God, I believe you could have done it, and you are all powerful. but you didn't. And so I have to surrender my will to yours. This is what Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane. He knew God. He said, if there is any other way, he knew God had all power to do all things. And yet, what did he say? But not my will, but yours. And you know what? God never rebuked him for coming and lamenting and sweating drops of blood in this hard situation. God will not turn away our hard questions either. I have seen God work a miracle since then with a baby in our family who was born not breathing. And I remember thinking, Lord, I cannot leave this hospital without this baby. It was one of my granddaughters. My daughter was still under anesthesia. She had no idea what was happening. Her husband was serving overseas. He had no idea what was happening. And God did. He brought a miracle, absolute miracle. Why does God do it sometimes and not? We won't know until heaven. And if we did, I think sometimes we want to know because we think if we knew the answer that it wouldn't hurt so bad. But I think if God even told us the answer, if we could even understand it, I'm not sure we'd agree. And so that place between the life that we wanted and the life that we have is surrender.
That is a tough truth, but that led you to the place where you met the God of all comfort, Lisa. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about we do not have a Savior who is not acquainted with our suffering. He knows our suffering. He bore our sorrows. He's acquainted with grief. We have a Savior who took on the suffering of the world. He knows that. And that is something that's a place of comfort, knowing that this isn't someone who just sits up, very distant and does, just lives in this perfect paradise. And, oh yes, you get your answer. You don't get your answer. This is a God who walked in our shoes, who became fully human, who knows what it's like to suffer. How did you find comfort? Because that's the name of your devotional, Lisa, the God of comfort, which just seems like, why didn't he comfort me with a miracle? What have you learned about the ways that God comforted you?
Yeah. You said at the beginning, there's a lot of things we can turn to in grief. We can try to self-medicate. We can try to escape it. We can try to just scroll or fake that we're fine. But in the end, we have to deal with our grief. And so what do we do when we're sitting in that place facing our pain? Well, God meets us at every pain point. I can remember nights where I was so lonely and, the nighttime, the evenings when my kids would go up and go to bed and the house was finally quiet, those used to be my cherished times. I looked forward to those times because that's when I had time to myself. And after Dan died, they were excruciating because I had time all to myself. And God met me there. All I can say is that he sustained me through it. And he will sustain us through every pain, the physical pain of grief, through the missing of grief, through the loss of the future that we thought we would have. But he also comforts us, as you said, through his presence. He was palpably present in my grief. And if somebody's listening and they're saying, well, I haven't experienced that, I would just encourage you, Psalm 34:18 says that God is near to the brokenhearted. And we know that scripture also says that when we draw near to him, that he will draw near to us. And so I would encourage you not to just say, well, that's not for me, that's not my experience, and write it off. Like, get into the word, like pray and ask God and say, Lord, I need to sense that you are with me in this. And then look for his hand. Look for his hand all around you.
Lisa,
God's goodness was there for us.
God's goodness. Yeah. I want to hear more. We have more to talk about with Lisa Appelo, a devotional journal for the grieving heart, God of comfort, more hope and healing on the other side of this break. We'll be right back.
Every day, AFA offers biblical insight on issues that others aren't willing to touch in the hopes that you'll become a world changer. That's why we're offering an in-depth worldview training course called Activate. 13 different professors teaching 18 sessions, all available online, including a printed workbook to help you apply what you've learned and 1-year access to AFA streaming content to give you even more resources. Find out more about Activate and sign up today at activate.afa.net.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Hello, this is Ed Vitagliano, co-host of today's Issues on AFI. That's right, it's a Boston accent. And that's because I wanted to invite you to join Wesley and Walker Wildman, as well as yours truly, on a tour of my hometown of Boston this September. A few highlights from our week-long itinerary include the Plymouth Plantation on Tuesday, where the Pilgrims settled. On Wednesday, we'll visit Paul Revere's house and learn more about his midnight ride to warn of the approaching British troops. Thursday, we'll go aboard the USS Constitution, which is docked in Boston Harbor. Historian Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation will be with us to point out spiritual significance. And this is just a brief sampling of the stops on our list. For all the information about our September Boston tour, visit tours.afa.net. That's tours.afa.net. And I hope to see you there. And maybe, just maybe, we'll park a few cars by Harvard Yard.
Hey everybody, Walker Wildman here. We just got done filming here at Wall Builders Library in Aledo, Texas with Stephen McDowell, Tim Barton, Rick Green, and myself. Episode 9 of AFA at Home, One Nation Under God, celebrating America's 250th anniversary. That's our theme. That's our title and subtitle for this video session. Coming out very soon for you. Stay tuned on July 4th, 2026, on America's 250th birthday. We're going to release this video. It's jam-packed full of American history, why we're here, why our founding fathers did what they did, why they fought and died for our nation. Stay tuned. Make sure to check us out at stream.afa.net. Follow all of AFA's major social media platforms, and make sure you share this with family and friends.
Faithful friend and father, I've called you through the years. You've been great physician when sickness lingered near. Through distressing moments, your name is new and sweet. You've become comforter to me. You are a comforter. That's who you are to me. Comforter, a name that fits so perfectly. Peace that passes all understanding. Comforter is who you are to me.
Welcome back, friends. That is Comforter by CeCe Winans, and that's exactly what we're talking about. I'm talking to Lisa Appelo today about her grief journey, losing her husband at far too young an age, leaving 7 young children behind, and she's talking about her grief journey. We've talked with Lisa before. She's written a book called Life Can Be Good Again, Putting Your World Back Together After It All Falls Apart. If you are walking a grief journey, especially losing a spouse, I really encourage you to find the words of comfort and hope that Lisa shared in her journey. And today she's here talking about a new devotional that she's written called The God of Comfort, a devotional journal for the grieving heart. And someone in your life needs to feel this encouragement, this comfort. I encourage you, just put it on their doorstep, put it in the mail to them, put it in their hands at church. Just drop it off to them. Just say, hey, I saw this. I thought it might be comforting to you. And that's all you have to say. Just say, I thought you could use this. I just felt like I should give this to you. Expect nothing in return. Now, we've heard Lisa say many times, and I think it bears repeating, comfort is not about fixing someone's pain, about taking it away. And in today's society, we're subconsciously kind of groomed towards that. Like, oh, let's just make it better. Take this supplement, take this class, this breathing technique. All of those things can be helpful. There can be things that are helpful on a grief journey. But comfort isn't about removing pain. It is about discovering God's faithful presence in every season. And I remember we just listened to CeCe Winans sing. I listened to her sing the goodness of God and singing, all my life you've been faithful. Even in those moments in the valley, even those moments of grief and loss. And we're talking about hope, not just a shallow optimism or how do you just go on in this world, but genuine hope that allows you not only to survive loss, but to thrive. And that definitely seems countercultural. And so, Lisa, I'm going to give it back to you and let you talk. You were right in the middle of some really good thoughts about sitting in God's presence in the midst of pain. And then I'd love for you just to share more about your grief journey and how you find those ways to thrive, even while still carrying the weight of that loss.
You know, one of the things that was very helpful for me was to look for God's goodness when life felt so bad. I think if you had asked me, I would have agreed, like theologically, yes, God is good. But I struggled with, is he good to me in this? Because I didn't feel it. My circumstances certainly didn't look it. I remember waking up every morning like it was Groundhog Day thinking, I cannot believe this is my life. And I have to walk through those same painful emotions and help my kids. And so well into my grief, this was not in the first few weeks. This was months and months into my grief. I thought I've got to see God's goodness. And I opened up a journal and I numbered 1 through 7. And I thought back about the day before and just wrote 7 very ordinary things, places where I had seen God's hand. Maybe it was the rain on the roof or a text that came in from a friend at the right time. And then the next day I numbered 8 through 14 and I did the same thing. And the uncanny thing is that when we look for God's goodness, we will begin to see more things to thank him for. We will begin to see his goodness all around us. It opens our eyes to his goodness. And it's not that it changed my situation or that the pain was any less. It's that it was a reminder that God was still with me, that all of the good was not behind me, that there was still good and joy in this life. And that if I would do this work through grief, that I would begin to see that more and more. So that was a very practical way that I was able to see God's comfort and see his hand on us and around us in loss.
You know, Lisa, I'm sure your children were a comfort to you because children just have a way of just being so innocent and so transparent and just really, they don't have especially the younger children they don't have some of those social pressures that we feel to manage our grief in a way that's, more presentable to the public. They just experience what they experience, and they may laugh one minute, they may cry the next minute. But that can be really hard when you're talking about those moments where you feel like, okay, you're getting out of that acute phase of grief where you wake up, it's Groundhog Day. How do I even get up and put one foot in front of the other? And you start resuming your life again. There can be some complicated emotions that come along with that too. How did you navigate that? And how do you navigate maybe the guilt that you feel for, okay, well, maybe I had a moment where I wasn't sad. How does that continue to work? And where do you see God in all of that?
I think for the family who's grieving or for the person who's grieving, as life begins to move on and that grief is not as acute anymore, it will surface, and it will especially surfaces on the milestone days, on a birthday or anniversary, or you see somebody else celebrating something and you think, well, I wanted to celebrate my anniversary. We worked really hard in our marriage. Or, a child that was the same age as the child that you lost. And you are tracking with that child and remembering your own and what that child would be doing now. That grief will surface all over again. And it's going to look different for everybody. But I would just say make space for that grief and be very intentional about it. On those milestone days, I have learned that my body remembers. I will think I'm okay. I'm I'm fine. I'm this many years in, and yet it still takes a toll on me. And I'll find either that day or sometimes the next day that I'm like really tired. I'm kind of unproductive. My body has just been working through this loss. So I would say make space for it, and be very intentional in the way that you want to recognize it as your family. On those milestone days, you may have traditions that you want to do. You may make a favorite dish. You may go to the gravesite. You may take a trip together to kind of get away and have that time together as a family. You may plant a flower garden or go serve, serve somebody in your community as a way to honor. There are so many ways that will mean something to you or to your particular family. And I would say, and it may be different year to year. You're not held to it. If in year 1, you had to get away for Christmas because you could not stand to be in your home, but year 2, you really want to be in your home, that's fine. Like, it's going to change. Your children may change in the way they respond to grief. And so just keep the traditions that help, let go of those that don't help, and be open. As a family, I think for my children, it's important for me. I have seen them really flourish in their life as their life has grown around their grief, and they've got their own families now. And yet sometimes on those hard days, those Father's Day, the days when they would have loved for their dad to clap their back and say, attaboy or attagirl, it can really surface. And so sometimes we talk about it audibly, and sometimes we all just know, and we just all know.
Well, Lisa, when you shared your story, you wrote this book, Life Can Be Good Again, Putting Your World Back Together After It All Falls Apart. And you shared very candidly your experience walking through grief and what that looked like. And God has given you a ministry of grief, which I'm sure you probably think sometimes like, why, Lord, why couldn't I have gotten something different? But something stirred in your heart to continue on, to see this need for this devotional journal, for this devotional journey is what it is. And it's 50 days. What did God put on your heart to put in this book for people who are walking a similar road of grief that you are walking? What do you hope that they will get out of this journey that God has put in your heart to share with them?
Culture tells us, as we talked about at the beginning, that there's a set of stages through grief. I remember meeting with somebody new in grief, and she had a pen and paper, and she wanted a checklist. She wanted the checklist of what she could do to get through grief. And I thought, if it was only that easy, because it's not a checklist. It's a messy mix of emotions and forward steps, and then you go back a little bit. And so the way through grief is not a method. It's not a prescription. It is a person. And it is the God of all comfort. And he meets us in our grief. Some days that looks like tears, quiet tears on your pillow where you feel like nobody can see or understand your pain. But God does, and he hears you, and he knows, and he is bottling every tear. None is wasted. Some days it looks like crying out before the Lord, asking questions about what now and how do I get through this, and opening scripture and seeing, the hope that God still has for you. So, Jessica, if we never were in a place of pain where we needed comfort, we would never know the Comforter. If we were never in a place where we were in desperate need, we would never know his provision. If we were never in a place where we were just heartbreakingly lonely, we would never know God's sustaining grace. He is all of these things for us. And none of us would ask for these places, right? We would be like, hard pass, please. And yet God meets us there, and we get to know him in a way that we would never get back. I would not want this for anyone or for our own life, but I would not want to go back to the girl I was before, because I know God in ways. I have seen him in ways. I have developed an intimacy with him in ways that I never would have had otherwise.
You know what I just was thinking about, Lisa, as you were talking about that and thinking about, your story and wanting it to be different. I was thinking about, what if life was perfect and everything went the way that we want and we got all of our dreams and nothing really hard ever happened and nobody got sick And then it just occurred to me, Lisa, that we have that right now. It's called social media. It's the highlight reel of everybody's life. And we scroll through and we see all the perfect highlights. And Lisa, what does that make everybody feel? Research shows it makes us feel anxious, depressed, like our life isn't measuring up. Like we don't find joy in that. But what are the stories that resonate with people? It's stories of hardship, stories of loss, stories of overcoming, stories of just impossibleness, where you just see like the resilience of the human spirit that God gave us, that God and God's stories. That's what resonates with us. And I think that God had to have put that in our hearts to know that, this is this world is not our home. This world is not perfect. And if we just look at a life that this is all that there is, that, hey, I'm just going to try to make this life the happiest that there is. And then, because when it's over, it's over. Or we can say, hey, this world is tough and we don't understand it, but somehow, in some way that we don't understand, God is going to make all things right. God is going to make all things new. I'll understand the things that I don't understand now. That's the place that I want to sit in, Lisa. And it's people like you who encourage and strengthen my hope in that, my hope in heaven as our home. What has God done to shift your perspective to living for eternity and not just not knowing that this world is broken, but it's not all that we have?
Yeah, you are absolutely right that we can hyper focus on our circumstance, or we can look around at everybody else who is seemingly living their best life, or we can look back at the life that we wanted, right? But God wants us to fix our eyes on him. And while none of us would want a place of suffering, what it does is it helps us loosen our grip on this world to be that stark reminder that this place that we were so focused on is not our home, that we better be building up treasure in heaven. I know when Dan died, I was stunned at how this place that seemed far off and distant, it was a one day, someday heaven, now was so close and so real. And to live in light of eternity is a gift. And so for the person who is walking through loss, for the person who feels the pain of their physical body and has seen a physical body deteriorate, we know it is in some ways a gift to know that this world is not our home and that we don't have to live with regrets of doing everything we can to make this world all there is, because we have an eternity with the Lord. And so to fix our eyes on God, who is our dwelling place.
I think about Savannah Guthrie and her mother, of course, who the whole world was following and disappeared, and the tragedy that happened there, that still the details are not known. And I did hear her in an interview asking somebody was questioning her, saying, are you going to question your faith? Because God has allowed this to happen. And I remember her saying, no, God is the only way. God is how I'm holding hands with my mom. And I thought that was a really beautiful way to put it, because it makes it seem so much closer. And Lisa, today is the day this devotional is released out into the world. It's called God of Comfort, a devotional journal for the grieving heart. It's by Lisa Appelo, and someone in your life needs this lifeline. And I encourage you just to get it, give it to them, and don't say a word. Just give it to them. Give them a hug. Pray for them. Maybe you need it for yourself. Wherever you are, whatever you're walking through, I pray, as I always do, that the Lord will bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, and give you peace. I'll see you right here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast